Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Thank everyone for coming. Nice to see another good crowd here tonight. I would like to start the meeting by acknowledging this meeting takes place in traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. So now we'll move on to approval of the agenda. So we'll need a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Moser, seconded by Councillor Sanford. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, next is the approval of the minutes from our last council meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Sanford. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed. Okay, so now we'll move on to number 5, which is the public input. So we have 2 names on the list, and then after the 2 people go, I will ask in case someone missed the list if they want to go up and speak. Like always, you get 3 minutes. Just state your name and address. And questions and comments are directed through the chair. So the first name on the list is Linda Mills.
Okay, my name is Linda Mills. I'm at 112 Hobson Street. I'm someone who attended the November 30th meeting concerning accessibility on the Civic Square. I feel it's important to bring this matter to the attention of the people of Lunenburg. We keep hearing that the town is in dire straits. So I want to ask, what did it cost for an outside agency to do the study and create these proposals? To do with the proposals, I think we should have online access to each proposal. There are 3 in order that we can study them further. We got a short time to see them at that meeting, and I can't remember everything that was on that. I'm sure nobody else can either. We should also have a rough estimate of the cost of each proposal without making any decisions. You don't have that. You can't have that. We also need to consider timelines. Priorities are important. Not everything has to be done at once. Number 3 for me, what is actually needed? Stairs from Townsend Street to the Fireman's Memorial are only used part of the year. There is sufficient access to the memorial from Cumberland Street. We could just take those stairs out. On that proposal, there was a big loop to get down to the memorial from that street. The proposed sidewalk on Cumberland Street across from the church is not needed and would be too steep for anybody in a wheelchair anyway. Access to the UNESCO monument can be achieved by the pathway, which is close to Townsend Street, and just take out the pathway that's close to Cumberland Street. One of the proposals had an atrium. I think that's a ridiculous thing for a town of this size. Who's going to take care of it? Who's going to clean the what word am I? Washroom. Who's going to clean the washroom? Who's going to make sure the elevator works? Do we really need a new playground area and new equipment? I think what we have is sufficient for now. And what is the red building in the proposals? In the RFP, that red space is called a site for, quote, a new public building. How is a new public building related to accessibility at all? Do we need another public building, and for what purpose? The war monuments is my next point. The generational and heritage connection to where the war monuments are currently should be really considered carefully. Much more public is needed about any thought of moving the war memorials. And cost. The cost has to be a large part of the conversation of any and all decisions. Do we need a committee for this or not? I want to ask who's really making these big, very expensive decisions. Is it the council? Is it the planning department? I don't think I know who's actually doing this, and I think we need to know that. That's all I have to say. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. I can tell you that I think the cost of the RFP was $80,000 roughly, if I'm not mistaken. It was in the budget. It was approved at budget time. And I think this is done for more into the future. The way I understand it is to more into the future to find out what we can and can't do, what the cost possibly would be for certain options. And then at that time, we'd be able to apply at other levels of government for assistance. But to my knowledge, because it hasn't really been talked about at this table, with that, this is way down the road. Like we're not planning on touching the Civic Square anytime in the near future. I think it was more planning ahead because of the new provincial rules that were put in place through accessibility, the way I understand it. Yeah. 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 And we did as a town write the province on some of their accessibility rules. I think at the last meeting, this council approved it because, you know, there are some rules that are going to be really hard for historic towns like ourselves to abide by if you want to keep businesses, especially in the downtown core, or the way the streets and the sidewalks are. So no, thank you very much. But I mean, this isn't happening overnight, and it's not, I don't think, in the budget or anything at this point. So it's just planning for future way down the road. So yep. Go ahead, Hillary.
Through the chair, thank you so much for your comments. I can certainly assure you that the planning department makes no decisions. Decisions are made by council, and we execute those decisions. But the proposals will be posted online. This week, we are having a small focus group with veterans and members of the disability community. And the proposals may be slightly revised as a result of the public consultation that has happened to date, and then they will be posted online well in advance of a visioning report coming to council, which will include cost estimates, recommendations on phasing the work. And as you mentioned, this project is being undertaken because all public spaces in Nova Scotia have to be universally accessible by 2030.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions, Linda. So the next speaker is Fawn Creaser.
Oh, okay. Oh, that does sound right. My name is Fawn Creaser. I live at 22 Young. I wrote all this and then realized I'm way over my time, so I'm going to try and shorten it. I am currently a citizen rep on the town's Heritage Advisory Committee. However, I am not here speaking on behalf of them. This is just myself as a citizen. And I wanted to speak about my intentions as when I'm on the Heritage Advisory Committee about the encompassing buffer zone as brought forward in the Heritage Conservation District proposed plan and bylaws. My intention comes in two parts. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about my own understanding of what I seem to hear about UNESCO and our designation, and what I've learned from being through a lot of this and asking a lot of questions. So my intention came in two parts. And the first part has to do, well, actually both parts have to do with the bigger picture. But as I see it, we as a town at some point applied for a UNESCO designation, and we were honored with receiving that award. And so we have it. And so now we are obliged to follow the rules as we should upon receiving that. So in my 10 years of living here, I've noticed that everyone cares about what is built in Lunenburg from one end to the other, having to do with the designs, the materials, anything to do with building in Lunenburg. So when this more encompassing buffer zone came up and came forward to us, it made sense to me that it better protected a lot of styles that we see within Lunenburg, because it's not just Georgian, it's not just arts and crafts, it's not just mid-century modern, there's quite a few. But I could see for me that all of these styles could be protected within that, as well as protecting our UNESCO designated area. So that's part of why I felt it was important. Over a number of meetings, as this was being discussed, coincidentally, talk of development started to happen in the town. And what was happening within what we were talking about got jumbled all up with a lot of talk about development. And it became hard kind of to separate the two, and hard for maybe others to understand why we were going with this. Yes, there's an additional step involved when you have to get a certificate of appropriateness. I've lived in Old Town where I've had to go through that step to get permits. I'm living in a section now that does not have that designation. And so I know both sides and what you have to go through, and it's really not that different. And for me, worth it to ensure that actually our home still contributes to the overall, not just the designated areas, but that overall thing of what I see everybody everywhere talking about is what I call the postcard view of Lunenburg. Everyone wants to keep that going. So I felt that it protected that. And so I still do. And I still think it should be supported for that reason. And even though technically I thought was great when we first moved out of the zone and not to have that, like I say, now I see it as more protective. The second part of my intention for supporting the buffer zone, and what I think also, from my understanding, parallels what UNESCO likes to see in a community where they award their designation. Obviously now makes sense that UNESCO would want the area, given their designation, to survive and thrive so that they can take care of everything that they were given this designation for. So in my head, again, to follow the thinking, I truly felt that UNESCO would expect us to A, keep our economy thriving so that we are able to take care of our built heritage without the burden of being carried totally by tax hikes to residents. And the next thing to follow that is B, so for an expectation for us to do what is right to ensure our financial stability by keeping our economic drivers such as Stilia, the fish plant, restaurants, stores supported. Right now, that is homes for people. And that can be units within homes, units within existing buildings, infilling vacant lots, and or home building on larger pieces of land. C, my reasoning is that UNESCO would want us to support plans and bylaws, including an expanded buffer zone as set out, as you have set out for your approval, that would satisfy both our need for creating homes as well as to keep the UNESCO designation protected. To have an area or areas where the buffer zone is thin, so sections cut out, against Old Town would be akin to me to lowering a section of a water dam designed to protect against rising tides. So it is to safeguard that area. So having said all that, I'm just asking you to keep that bigger picture in mind when making your decision about changing an area that protects Old Town UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there anybody else that would like to get up and speak or say anything tonight? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on then on the agenda. There are no presentations tonight. So the next thing on the agenda is one correspondence that we had from a resident on the Cornwallis Street renaming. And it's just correspondence. It's there for your information. There's no public hearings, public information, meetings or appeals. So the first thing is business arising and unfinished business, which would be 9.1, the Old Town Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw Update. It's the information and discussion report. So Hillary.
Thank you and good evening. For the record, I'm Hilary Grant, Director of Community Development, and it is my pleasure to continue Council's consideration of the draft Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw. Given the public feedback received, I want to first take this opportunity to clarify the town's role relative Old Town Lunenburg's World Heritage listing to contextualize the review process and the plan and bylaw itself. Then I'll quickly review the proposed amendments. And I apologize in advance for the longer than usual presentation. Old Town Lunenburg is unique amongst Canada's other World Heritage sites. Lunenburg is one of only 2 urban World Heritage sites in Canada, the other being Quebec City. I would argue that given the relative lack of federally and provincially owned sites here in Lunenburg compared to Quebec City, the town of Lunenburg has the largest legal and administrative heritage obligations of any municipality in Canada. As mentioned by some on November 28th, UNESCO listing does not come with standing federal funding. In the World Heritage System, there are nesting levels of authority. At the international level, there is the World Heritage Committee. They are the body that decides whether sites should be added to the World Heritage List, the World Heritage in Danger List, or delisted. Only the decisions of the World Heritage Committee are binding under the World Heritage Convention. The next level of authority is the national state parties, of course, in our case, the Canadian federal government. These are the national governments who have signed the World Heritage Convention and have committed to protecting World Heritage sites in their countries. The bureaucracy that supports Canada's involvement in the World Heritage Convention is Parks Canada. Parks Canada compiles reports and updates for the World Heritage Committee in collaboration with site managers. In Canada, the relationship between federal and municipal governments can be complicated, especially when it comes to heritage protection. Because while recognition from a higher level of government, say the Government of Canada or UNESCO, brings prestige, it does not come with legal protection. That protection falls to the provincial and municipal governments. So while World Heritage listing is seen as the most prestigious accolade a site can receive, it does not automatically translate into legal protection. The United Nations cannot compel Canada to protect World Heritage sites. Likewise, the Government of Canada cannot compel municipalities to protect World Heritage sites, and it is highly unusual for the federal government to intervene in municipal affairs, as indicated in the appended email from Parks Canada. The tool that the World Heritage Committee does have to try to enforce good heritage practice at World Heritage sites is the World Heritage in Danger List and its power to remove properties from the World Heritage List. Not to be flippant, but the World Heritage in Danger List is sort of akin to purgatory. It can lead to redemption or delisting. Remediation measures are usually suggested when a site is placed on the World Heritage Endangered List, and the legal authority over the site has the option of whether to undertake those measures. If they do, the site is normally removed from the World Heritage Danger List, and it keeps its World Heritage status. This process can unfold over many years, the World Heritage Committee only meeting once per year. Delisting can happen for several reasons, including if legal protections are insufficient to protect a site's outstanding universal values. And fears have been expressed that this heritage plan and bylaw threatens Old Town Lunenburg's World Heritage status on these grounds. It is staff's firm belief that this is not the case. The plan and bylaw has been written to protect every aspect of Old Town Lunenburg's outstanding universal value, evidence of colonial settlement, its evolving vernacular architecture tradition, and its marine culture. It also protects the site's authenticity and integrity, including its authenticity of setting. I've explained in my report, for example, how view planes and a division between urban and non-urban lands are as well protected under this draft plan and bylaw as they are in the plan and bylaw currently in force. Since 1972, when the World Heritage Convention was passed, only 3 of almost 1,200 World Heritage sites have been delisted. There are currently 56 properties on the World Heritage in Danger list. A quick review of other historic centers comparable to Old Town Lunenburg that are currently on the World Heritage in Danger list suggests some threats that may plague Old Town Lunenburg now and in the future. For example, high-rise construction around the historic center of Vienna World Heritage Site saw it added to the World Heritage Endangered list. The old walled city of Shabam in Yemen, listed like us as an outstanding example of urban planning, is on the World Heritage in Danger list due to water damage. This is largely consistent with the nomination dossier for Old Town Lunenburg, which warns Canada to ensure Old Town Lunenburg's outstanding universal value is not obscured through neglect or excessive growth. Venice has almost been added to the World Heritage in Danger list many times because of the tourism pressure it faces, turning it into a museum. The draft plan and bylaw has been drafted to protect Old Town Lunenburg from just such threats. And attractive development was a major concern of presenters on November 28th, especially the possibility of development on Blockhouse Hill. Policies relating to setting and view planes in the current plan drafted in 2000 mention permitted future development, including on Blockhouse Hill, confirming that development on Blockhouse Hill is permitted under the current plan and bylaw. Map 6, appended to Old Town Lunenburg's World Heritage Site nomination, shows the lower slope of Blockhouse Hill zoned for residential development, such that nominators and reviewers, as well as the World Heritage Committee, knew these areas were not protected as undeveloped green space and might be built upon when Old Town Lunenburg was listed as a World Heritage Site. The lower slopes on Blockhouse Hill were also still zoned for residential development when the World Heritage Committee created the World Heritage Buffer Zone in 2017. The draft plan and bylaw includes all of Blockhouse Hill in the Heritage Conservation District for the first time, increasing heritage protection of Blockhouse Hill. And the new proposed transition area protects the World Heritage Site writ large from potential detractive development around it. If council would like to stop any and all possible development on Blockhouse Hill, the review of the draft plan and bylaw is simply not the time. The staff report clarifies that using the HCD plan and bylaw to outright prohibit development on Blockhouse Hill is legally impossible due to Section 19D of the Nova Scotia Heritage Property Act. It is also valuable to keep Venice in mind, and it almost being placed on the World Heritage in Danger list multiple times because of hyper-tourism. Like Venice, it is not enough for Old Town Lunenburg's original physical colonial plan to be conserved for it to retain its World Heritage status. Old Town Lunenburg also has to continue functioning as a town. This necessitates balancing a need for conservation and a need for change to support the residents here. Staff have tried to strike a balance between conservation and evolution in the draft plan and bylaw. For example, allowing solar panels on the roof of a historic structure that contributes to a World Heritage listing is not generally considered best conservation practice. You would not, for example, expect to see a solar panel on top of the Taj Mahal or Frank Lloyd Wright designed building. However, the Heritage Advisory Committee has expressed that flexibility here benefits residents and reflects the town's commitment to environmental sustainability. Thus, solar panels are allowed on the roofs of buildings in Old Town Lunenburg under this draft plan and bylaw. To keep Old Town Lunenburg's World Heritage status, you must ensure the protection of Old Town Lunenburg's past and the town's viability into the future. Staff feel that this plan and bylaw balances the town's commitment to preserving Old Town Lunenburg's outstanding universal value while allowing freedom of choice and evolutionary possibility that will contribute to the town's environmental and economic sustainability. So in closing, to address citizen concerns and based on council's discussions on November 28th, staff are recommending the following amendments. Amend section 1.6 transition area in the draft HCD bylaws conservation and design guidelines to include the distinction between urban and non-urban areas and unobstructed views over Old Town Lunenburg World Heritage Site out towards Lunenburg Harbor from the location of the town's 4 original blockhouses to further the protection of Lunenburg's authenticity of setting. Amend section 2.5, new buildings in the transition area in the draft HCD bylaws, conservation and design guidelines, lightening controls on new and non-historic buildings in the transition area, such as, for example, removing all material requirements. Lastly, amend section 2.2 and 2.3 in the draft HCD bylaws, conservation and design guidelines. So new commercial and residential buildings in the World Heritage Site must be compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from residential and commercial character defining structures on the same street, block, or 8 surrounding blocks, increasing the historic precedents from which designers can draw inspiration. Some alternative ways to address public concerns are outlined in the staff report, such as maintaining the current boundary of Old Town Lunenburg Heritage Conservation District, or revising the boundary to remove the Hobson-Oxner Loop. Please note, however, that a boundary change at this stage would necessitate an additional public hearing, including public advertisements and mailing notices, and this would cost approximately $2,000. Thank you again for your patience. I look forward to your thoughts, and I will certainly do my best to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? Councilor Moser?
Thank you, Worship. Not really so much as a question as comment. Thank you, Hillary. That's a great report. Really do appreciate that. Good information. I think you've given us a good basis on which to move forward. I'm still of the opinion that, the buffer zone should probably remain, as is. That has less impact for the residents that currently live in those areas. And it's served us well in terms of protecting the original UNESCO site. So that would be the only change I would recommend going forward. And I know it might be a little costly, but at the end of the day, it could be a huge cost for some of the other residents that live in those places. And then I could probably rest my case on composited materials as opposed to, trying to, not have wood as your, only alternative to building. So as we expand beyond the buffer zone, at least then we have alternative materials that can be used in those areas. So that would be my only suggestion.
Thank you. Any other questions to Hillary or comments? Deputy Mayor?
Sorry, it always takes me a second to find unmute. Again, thank you, Hillary, and your staff for a very comprehensive report. I just wanted to clarify, there was some consideration, as you mentioned, to removing the Oxnard Loop, the end of Hobson, from this district. Yeah, again, to Councillor Mosher's point, I think, a couple $1,000 to get proper feedback and to make sure we get this right, considering we are going to be living with the results of this for some time. I don't think it's a bad thing. My question, I believe we asked last time, and I just want to confirm with you, is there a case to be made? So if somebody had the concern was if somebody had bought a property in those locations, and would they now be subject to new regulations, or would they still be permitted to operate as far as upgrades, materials, all those things in those in the buffer zone or adjacent to the buffer zone under the new bylaw, or will they be subject to the stricter regulations immediately?
If the Heritage Conservation District boundary is passed as it is currently drafted in the draft plan and bylaw, then property owners within that transition area would need to apply for a certificate of appropriateness to modify their property. Now, the restrictions are much lighter than in Old Town Lunenburg proper. So for example, there's a wider range of stylistic choices, and the only material restriction is that the building has to be clad in wooden cladding. Of course, I am recommending further lightening those provisions, but someone in that area would need to submit for a certificate of appropriateness. If the transition area is removed completely, then anyone living in that area would not be subject to any heritage regulations. Any changes to their property would only be subject to the land use bylaw and other municipal bylaws that are in place.
So if there's an existing home in that area that currently has, say, vinyl siding, or if they wanted to put solar panels on their roof, they would be subject to the new rules immediately.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns, comments? I have a couple, if I may. First of all, depending on what we do, it might not be a problem anyways, but I see that we were supposed to be doing the second and final reading on January 23rd. I'd like us to look at moving that to February, because I think that's the meeting that Brian McKay-Lyons is coming back with some information. So I really want to try to keep that agenda open for that item. I don't think we need a whole lot more on that agenda. I could be wrong, but I'm just thinking that's a good idea. Number two, so if we pass this bylaw as is, or with some amendments, and UNESCO comes back, or Parks Canada comes back after we pass it and submit it to them and say this isn't going to fly, or you might lose your UNESCO designation, which, because they won't give you an answer before you submit anything to them. Can we go back at that time as a town? We can always change bylaws, can we not? We can always reverse it, right?
Absolutely, through the chair, absolutely. And as I explained with, for example, UNESCO's largest stick, if you will, the World Heritage in Danger List, it is largely a tool to encourage good behavior. So generally, when site management is veering off course in the eyes of the national authority or the international authority, recommendations are made, and you're normally given ample opportunity to change course.
Thank you, because I mean, everything's being done with great intentions, but you never know what they might say. So I'm glad to know that. And I guess last, you submitted in your report, and you spoke about one of the main reasons this was expanded and done, done the way it was done was for the possible future development of Blockhouse Hill, to keep people's minds at ease that they had to follow these types of guidelines because they'd now be in the buffer zone. So if we wanted to basically appease to those that already have current homes on the one side of, in the current buffers, outside the current buffer zone, can we do for like all existing builds are out, but anything new, say in the Blockhouse area would have to be included? Like, can we sort of just change the map, I guess is what I'm asking, like rather than going the whole way down to the path is what we're doing all the way over, maybe starting it behind the houses on Hobson Street, I think it is. Can we start the line there instead? And that would satisfy both the people that now currently own homes that don't want to fall under the guidelines, and it would also satisfy the residents that are scared that if this is removed completely, Lord knows what you might get built on Blockhouse Hill. So it sort of protects both. Are we able to do that?
Through the chair, the sky is the limit in terms of what you can do in the heritage plan and bylaw. And certainly one of the alternative options in the report is exactly that. It carves out the loop and then keeps the rest of the area in a transition area under the new heritage plan and bylaw. The logic for the transition area, of course, is not tailored to Blockhouse Hill. It was put in place because the operational guidelines for the World Heritage Convention specifically say that UNESCO recognized buffer zones should be complemented with legal protections at the municipal level, or protections by whoever the legal authority is who has the power to put them in place. It is interesting to note, however, that the nominations dossier did consider restrictive zoning sufficient in the case of Old Town Lunenburg, and that the future future possible boundary map in the 2000 plan and bylaw that is currently in place didn't include the Oxner Hobson, the Oxner Loop in it. So excluding that area wouldn't be a change in municipal policy direction if that's the direction that council would like to go.
Thank you, because I'm leaning towards like Councilor Mosier and Deputy Mayor. I'd like to see that area taken out and redone. And if it costs us a couple $1,000s, I think we should get this right. And if there's a way we can do both, I think it's something we might want to look at. So thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, we can move on then. And probably by the sounds of things, we won't be meeting on January 23rd for the final reading. So stay tuned. So 10-1 now is Blockhouse Hill Design. Just it's an information what we heard report. There's a draft motion there that council accept Ryan McKay Lyons design project. So I'll need a motion and then we can have some discussion if we'd like. Moved by Councilor Mosier, seconded by Councilor Sanford. So would you like some discussion on the motion? Do we need would we like Hillary to go through it, or just information at this point? Any discussion on the motion? The only comment I would make, and I guess I'm making a few comments, is there any way to extrapolate the numbers of the non-resident numbers from the overall survey numbers, just so we know how many non-residents have phoned in or emailed in or whatever they might have done to fill out one of them surveys? You know, it seems to be a contentious issue about non-residents and residents. So I'd just like to know how many non-residents filled out the survey if we could. If it's not possible, if it's something they didn't track, then we can't get it. But if it is, I'd like to know the number if possible.
Certainly, I can confer with the McKay Lyons Sweet Apple team about the possibility of such an analysis. The extensive appendices in the report includes all the responses submitted by participants in this project to date. It may be more difficult to do that analysis for the in-person workshops, but online, I do believe that names were collected. And so it may be possible, but I'd have to do some digging and report back to council.
Thank you. I just think that, you know, anyone living even within Lunenburg County that calls Lunenburg their hometown, I like to hear what they have for input, but quite frankly, if someone's emailing in from Italy, their thoughts on the whole survey, I don't know where that's relevant to us. So I think we should maybe know how many people really did fill out the survey worldwide, because it might change the numbers a bit. So there's a motion on the floor. So we prepared to move the motion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to 10.2, wastewater treatment plant upgrade and expansion design and engineering design. Awarding the request for proposals. We can get a motion on the floor and then we can give Tyson to give a report if we want to do it that way. So is there a motion? Moved by Councilor Sanford, seconded by Councilor Birtles. Okay, Tyson, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation from staff is that council award the wastewater treatment plant upgrade and expansion design and engineering service request for proposal to CBCL in the amount of $517,863 plus tax. The alternative would be to not award the RFP to CBCL and direct staff to either reissue or postpone the RFP. So some background, whilst the existing wastewater treatment plant is appropriate for our current size of town and demand, with the projected population increase over the next 40 years, it's been recognized that the loading will increase on the plant, and that needs to be proactive upgrade and expansion to account for this. So the town has previously conducted a feasibility study, which was further developed during a pre-design report. So the scope of the intended upgrades and expansion to the wastewater treatment plant include Construction of the sequencing batch reactor tanks and an equalization tank. Modification of existing bioreactor to serve as an aerobic sludge digester. Replacements to the headworks, blowers, and the UV disinfection system. Removal of the DAF units that are currently used as part of the existing process. Expansion of the sludge dewatering press to add another channel to that. And the installation of a backup generator, which would help us out immensely in power outages. So the scope for this particular RFP includes the development of a tender package, including the drawings and specifications for the construction of all those items that I just covered. Class A cost estimate, a phase 2 environmental assessment, support for applications to Nova Scotia environment and climate change, which will be a primary importance to the project, tendering support and construction support during the project. So the budgeted amount approved for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades project is $9,982,000. And that budget includes the engineering and construction costs. So moving on to the RFP itself, that closed on November 8th. And as a condition of the RFP, we have 90 days from that date for acceptance, which takes us into early February next year. So there's a summary of the submissions in the table. We received one submission from CBCL, and I've included a breakdown of the design and preliminary work and the services during construction. So whilst it's not the town's preference to only receive one proposal when we issue RFPs, in this instance, CBCL was responsible for the pre-design report, are very familiar with the day-to-day operations of our current wastewater treatment plant and our team, and have extensive experience in wastewater treatment plant work at 100+ locations detailed in their submission. So a very strong team to work with. Within CBCL's submission, they also included a proposed schedule, which I thought may be of interest to council. So it includes a phase 2 environmental assessment and detailed design completed by late in May 2024, construction commencing in September 2024, following the tendering process, and construction, including the commissioning, completed by the end of March 2026, which is what we need with the grants that we've received. So in terms of the financial components, earlier this year, it was announced that this project was granted a total of $7.286 million from the federal and provincial governments. The amount approved for the wastewater treatment plants project is $9,982,000, with the town's funding coming from debt and then the grants that I just talked about. Awarding an engineering services RFP was an anticipated cost in the budget for the project. That concludes the report. There's the motion for your consideration.
Thank you, Tyson. Any questions to Tyson? Deputy Mayor had his hand up first, and then Councillor Moser, and then over to this side of the room.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Tyson. Like you, I'm not totally pleased that we had one submission, but the fact that it is CBCL and that they are as familiar as they are with how we've gotten to this point is comforting. That we spent a lot of time with this and early in our term, going over in great detail the wastewater treatment plant, and it's nice to see this moving forward. My biggest question, I think, is not particularly directed towards Tyson. It's more towards perhaps our finance director, Lisa. I see we're funding from debt, $2.7 million or so. Where does that leave us in our borrowing? And if this project should exceed the projected cost, $9.9 million, do we have capacity to make sure we can get this over the line and get it built?
If I may, through the chair, your worship. So at this point, we have been anticipating this borrowing all along and working it into our borrowing capacity. Depending on the overages, if they should come in, that could be a challenging discussion for sure, depending on how much how much we would have to fund in addition to what we were originally anticipating.
If I could follow up to that, then what's the plan if we're going to be up against borrowing? How are we going to deal with this? Do we have capacity and reserves we can get into, or is there some other mechanism we have that we can fund our share? And in addition, most of this funding is coming from federal and provincial partners. Have they been approached? What conversations have we had about, if this budget does increase, their willingness to up their contribution, if any?
Again, through your chair, your worship. We have spoken to the funders. Obviously, we're not the only municipality with the same kind of concern. At this point, the funders are saying that they're at their capacity as well. There is always the possibility that when other units come in, that they don't have any flexibility and they have to forego their grants. So it really is just you have to wait to see what the numbers look like and then see what kind of conversations we have to have at that point, whether it's going back to the funders from some parts that we have to defer other projects and operate from some of our reserves that we were planning for those projects. It really would be a comprehensive review at that point, depending on what we're looking at.
And could you elucidate on when that point might be?
I think that might be a Tyson question about when that point that we would have some refined cost estimates.
Through the chair, so the Class A cost estimate is included as part of this RFP. So that would be sort of one milestone or indicator that we could get a more refined estimate of the costs, more detailed estimate, and then going through the tendering process. At that point, there's always contingencies and those kinds of items that you need in this kind of project, but we'll have a much firmer handle on it at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Moser.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Tyson. So if this, assuming we award this RFP tonight, when do you see that next step? When do you see there, going out with an RFP for construction, and when do you see that project being able to start?
Through the chair, I would think that Class A estimate we would have by the end of May 2024, and then construction would be starting sort of in the fall of 2024.
Thank you. Anybody on this side of the room? Councillor Sanford.
Through the chair, to Tyson. Tyson, I'm thinking, first of all, thank you for the information. And I'm actually quite excited that we're finally at this point, because it seems like it's been taking us forever to get here. And I know that when we started our term this time, it was, we were dealing with flooding at the wastewater treatment plant and all the issues that went along with all of that. So it's nice to be at this point finally. So as I was listening and reading in the reports, I'm thinking that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just increasing the capacity for future development, but if I understand correctly, it's also going to serve to sustain and increase the life of the wastewater treatment plant itself, correct?
Through the chair, yes, you're correct. It's upgrading several of the components, like the headworks where the waste comes in, the UV treatment. The actual treatment process would would the SBR process would be replacing the existing treatment process. And that the SBR tanks are a much more widely used process for treatment, especially plants our kind of size. Our plant has a very unique process that it uses, and there's not many plants like that in North America, full stop. So that will be helpful to our team. And so in terms of the upgrades, yes, it will be helping prolong the life of our plant. Yes.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor?
I just want to clarify something you said there, Tyson, if I could, through the chair. You mentioned that the tendering process would hopefully be complete by May 2024 to allow construction starting in September 2024. I just noticed in CBCL's submission, they're looking at doing the phase 2 environmental assessment and detailed design for completion of May 2024. I just want to confirm those two processes, the tendering process and those two proposals from CBCL, those will run at the same time and both be ready to go by May 2024, so that we're not waiting on one or the other to begin this in the fall.
Through the chair. So just to clarify, phase 2 environmental assessment and detailed design completed by late May 2024, which would allow the tendering to follow. The tendering process would follow once the design's completed. The tendering would be based on the design. So the construction commencing in September 2024 following the tendering process.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, the motion's on the table. Call for motion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed?
Sorry,
Motion
Mayor, could you just be more clear on the motion? We just said that motion. We haven't actually detailed what the motion is. I think we should be more clear when
we read it off before we
Did we?
discussed it, but if the person making the motion wants to reread it, they can, or
It's just a recommended motion.
it's the recommended motion as presented.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the one that's written in your package, probably in front of
Yeah.
you. So
I see it there. Yeah, I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure what we're
Excellent.
voting on.
So all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. So we'll now move on to 10.3 Municipal Capital Grown Program Grant Application. So I'm not sure, it's both Lisa and Tyson. So which one of you guys want to have at it right now?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the province is running a one-time funding program called the Municipal Capital Growth Program. This program can fund projects, 50% of eligible projects. Staff have discussed it, and we feel that the Green Street Sidewalk Reconstruction Project, which was deferred in 2023-24 due to fiscal constraints, is a good fit for the funding program, as the project addresses accessibility items and has a design and tender package completed already, which positions the town well for a successful application. And there is a motion in the report for council's consideration in support of this application.
Thank you, Lisa. Someone want to make the motion that's written there? It's moved by Councillor Bertle, seconded by Councillor Ernst. Any future discussion? Councillor Mosier.
Well, I'm all for the motion, but I'm thinking at the pace we're doing Tannery Road, maybe we can include that too.
I think that was a sort of a joke. So anyway, so any other questions? Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, motion carried. So the last thing really on the agenda tonight is 10.4, the budget variance. It's really just for information only. Does anyone have any questions? If they do, Lisa can answer them, but it's really just an information report.
Yes, I was just going to give just the briefest of summaries, Your Worship. So this budget variance report is for the quarter ending September 30th, which is 50% of our fiscal year. The year-to-date versus budget results are on track for where I would expect us to be at that point in the fiscal year. But we obviously need to keep in mind that we're heading into the season of some more budget variability with the heating season and snow clearing. The next report for the end of Q3 will be to December 31st, which will be in council in probably in February.
Thank you. No questions for Lisa, is there? Okay, so now there's really nothing else. There's no notice of motions. There's no in camera. So before we move for adjournment, on behalf of council and staff, I'd just like to wish you all a very happy holidays and enjoy the next 2 or 3 weeks. We'll be back at it probably on January 9th, I think, or is that a budget meeting the 9th, Jamie?
To the chair, we're planning for that, yes.
Okay, so watch the website and your calendar and we'll hopefully see you all on January 9th, but have a great holidays, everyone, and stay safe, everybody.